you are welcome to the online session. It is not like session, but interview-based session. It's a new format, and it's called Online Learning in Academic Subjects. And to know the tricks and the trades of online learning, I invited Ben. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Ben, for agreeing and accepting my idea to give a short brief session. So first of all, I would like to explain what is the reason I invited Ben. I took an online session, which is called Online Learning Digital Tools, about 1.5 or 2 months. I don't remember, Ben. But to pass all this information, what I learned from this session, I wanted to pass to my colleagues, and to squeeze 2 months information, knowledge, and skills. I just invited Ben to squeeze everything in one interview session. So first I will address some questions to Ben, and then I will reserve 10 minutes at the end of the session. If my colleagues have questions, they can address their questions to you, and I think your answers, Ben, and the suggestions, ideas might generate ideas that will contribute to my colleagues' online teaching expertise. So Ben, first of all, before moving to online topic, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you? What you are doing here? And so on.
It's my pleasure to do that. Thank you, first off, just Jibek, for inviting me to do this. When you contacted my supervisor and me about me doing this, I was excited. And when you said it was an interview, I was even more excited because I like the kind of informal, kind of personal connection that comes from an interview. I think that's going to result in a much more interesting discussion. So I'm very happy that I can be here with you and your teachers today. So to introduce myself, my name is Ben Taylor. I am originally from Southern Illinois in the United States, close to a big city called St. Louis. That is not where I am now. I live in Nur-Sultan, Kazakhstan, the capital city, and I've lived here for 4 years in various parts of Kazakhstan. I am currently working as the English language coordinator for the U.S. Embassy here. And so what I do in that capacity is I run different English language engagement programs, including the engagement sessions for this MOOC, which is where we started to work together today. And so that's been really great. I also do stuff with these access programs, which is youth education initiatives for people who have maybe coming from lower economic backgrounds. And I've been teaching for 9 years. I am focused on digital tools and digital teaching, but also group work and especially writing projects. I really love college essay writing, among other things. So there's probably more I could say, but that's enough about me. Jivek, I think you might be muted.
So, okay, I think now you know teaching background of Ben and where he works, and what he does. So, my next question that I would like to ask is to define what online learning is in English. I mean, as an academic subject.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. When you sent me the questions earlier, I have to say this was the question that I had to think the most about because I kind of have my own understanding of what this is, but I thought, is this a definition that everybody would agree with? And here's kind of what I came to. I'm going to pull up I won't share my screen yet. I'll be sharing screen later. I just need to pull up a Word document. Okay, so Here's some of what I want to say. I guess I would say that online learning has existed as long as the internet has existed, basically. So um, it's certainly more prominent and more important now than at any time, probably in our history. And that's because of this COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, many people are working from home due to social distancing and other considerations. And so when we talk about it in our current context, when we talk about it in our current situation, it's taking the academic work that we value as teachers. And so if you're working academically in a university, this would include maybe a focus on plagiarism, research writing, research paper writing, a need for citations, a variety of vocabulary, among other things, and then engaging students in that material on an online platform. It does not necessarily mean a lack of engagement. In fact, I think that there is a great capacity for as much, if not more, engagement than what you would have in a physical classroom in some regards. That kind of depends on a creative and flexible approach to the tools that we use. But certainly things like group activities and all the stuff that I love as a teacher, I have been happy to see I can still do online. So.
Okay. So, Ben, okay, how long have you been teaching on remotely? I mean,
Okay.
English, all the subjects you mentioned, and via internet.
Sure. I've actually had kind of an interesting experience as a teacher. Back in 2012, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in a country called the Federated States of Micronesia. And when I was there, we had very, very little technology. My bigger issues were sometimes a dog would walk into the classroom or that. My students certainly had no way to reach me outside of class, and I had no way to reach them. And so when I came to Kazakhstan several years later, it was a huge shift for me. All my students suddenly had smartphones or at least access to them. There was this digital stuff. And so from 2016, which is when I first came to Kazakhstan, I guess I've been working online in some way, shape, or form for those 4 years. But of course, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's been a lot more serious. This is now, at this point, this is pretty much the only way I teach. I cannot physically see my students right now. So I think you might be muted again.
Jipek, you need to turn your microphone on.
Yeah,
please unmute yourself.
sorry. So, what digital tools are there for online English teaching and learning? I deliberately separate them, online teaching and learning, to look at this online process from different perspectives. And to look at these digital tools from different perspectives. Or maybe there is no separation between this and that.
Well, I think there's a continuity between them, but I think there is a separation, of course. As an example, when I'm learning, I might go to a different resource than I would when I'm teaching. So I'm happy to get to this question. This is kind of the meat of our discussion today. I'm sharing here. I've just shared in the chat a link to a bunch of resources that I've kind of accessed and put together for you. I encourage you, if you'd like, to take some notes during this. But all the resources I'm going to be talking about are available there. Most of them come from this MOOC that I did with Jipek. And so let me see, I'm going to get to my notes here. Okay, so as a learner, there's a couple sites that I would really share. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, so we can kind of see what I've got going on. And I'll take us to the website that I've put up here too. So you can see I've got things separated on the site by different skills. And the reason they're organized in this way is the MOOC is organized in this way, but certainly there's other ways we could look at this as well. So I'm going to get to what we could use as a learner first. This is not certainly limited to, well, this is not the only stuff we could use as a learner, but I think this stuff is very useful. Okay, I don't need two of those. There we go. So the first website I'm going to take us to, one of my absolute favorites, for English language learners of various kinds, university, elementary, whatever, is VOA Learning English. Okay, so VOA is Voice of America. This was actually a radio service offered by U.S. State Department, English news from around the world, told in English back in like the 1950s even. But in the age of the internet, of course, this has gone online. And so we've got radio, video, news stories. There is a proper VOA News website that is not made for English language learning audience, but Learning English is, okay? And so what do we get when we come here? Well, I've got lots of stories. Obviously, COVID-19 is a really big story right now. Racial justice is a really big story right now in America as well. And so if I look at these different sections, I've got articles set up by category. And if I go here, let's say to arts and culture, I know that we're working with mostly IT students, students with a tech background. But if I was working with like an architecture class, as I have before, I might use this article. So here I've got an article. If I'm learning myself or if I'm teaching, the articles here, it's got pre-selected vocabulary in bold that might be difficult for our students. You would still want to look through and find for yourself if there's any language that might be difficult for your students. And we'll talk about some tools that could help you identify those words in a little bit. But you'll notice that the words that have been pre-identified actually come with a glossary at the end of the article, and there's a recording of the article as well.
Christo, the artist known for large temporary public arts projects.
Okay, so we're not going to listen to that right now, but for students, this will come up much later in our discussion today, but for students who may have limited Wi-Fi at their place of residence or their workplace, could download this when they are around Wi-Fi and actually have the audio downloaded. And so these articles come out regularly, okay? One of many features of this website are these regular articles that come out. For people that are really struggling with English, maybe are just at the beginning level or pre-intermediate, there's a section called Let's Learn English. And here you've got different lessons. Each one of these is focused on a various point of grammar. So if I just randomly go to lesson 14, I'm learning about asking questions, okay? And I'm learning about not only the structure of questioning, but I'm learning about the intonation. Where does my tone go up? Usually at a question, it would go up at the end of the sentence, right? And so there's a bunch of these which are really good for self-education. You wouldn't necessarily need a teacher to guide you through this. Now, you could use a teacher to guide you through this, but you wouldn't need one. They're actually designed for that. Level 2 takes us from pre-intermediate to about an intermediate level of education. So there's 50 different lessons. I believe it's 50 in level 2. And so for a learner specifically, I think that this is, okay, I guess there's only 30. That's fine. For a learner specifically who's working from home, I think this is a really good tool. There's also the Test Your English here where you can actually check your level, okay? So that's another thing we might go for, the beginning level stuff. Pronunciation tools here. Somebody wants to do that. If you're a student or an individual who is studying English on your own, not in a classroom, and you do that by watching the news, but there are sometimes words that you miss, this is a really great section full of minute-long videos in which the word is used in context, okay? And then we can actually see how that word is used and try to use it ourselves. They offer discussion questions for doing so afterwards. So like pandemic, that would be a word that's been coming up an awful lot lately, right? Okay, so what else is on here? Another one of the big things that comes out of our MOOC, Jibek, and one of the big things that I would really press to us as teachers, but also for our students, is that students often learn best when there's some element of self-selection. So if the students can actually choose the material that they want to use, they're going to be learning a lot better, okay? Because the motivation is there. All right, now we don't want them to always do that. Of course, we need to direct them sometimes, but something like this can really help with that self-selection when we want it. Here we've got different language that comes from popular movies. It's coming up right now. So idioms and maybe phrasal verbs that a student wouldn't be comfortable using on their own that they might see in a movie, like take you down, right? From Fast and Furious 9. Here we've got a short video that explains what that phrase means and kind of checks your listening capacity there, okay? There's also grammar stuff on here, okay? And more and more. This section, words and their stories, lots of different American English idioms. Then news literacy, being able to critically think about the news. We have this concept now, of course, of fake news, and that's a whole separate conversation, right? Helping students to identify, using critical thinking, what to look for in the news to make sure that what you're getting is more factual information, right? Okay. Last thing I want to show you here, I guess, is the day in photos, which is down here. And I guess I use this more as a teacher and less as a student. But this is a really great section of photos from around the world. These protests in America and worldwide are definitely the big story right now. But there are photos updated every day from all over the place and on a wide range of topics, actually. And so I like to use these photos, and I can kind of show you how I would use these photos later. But I think for students, these kind of photos, a person could look at the photo and say, just answering some questions. What do you think is happening in this photo? What would you do if you were in this photo? Students could actually look at that and use that for their own practice. So this is just one of many, many websites that we could use. But I think for learners, for students without a teacher, this is a pretty good one-stop shop that we could use. What I mean is that we could get lots of materials from here and actually practice our English and improve on our own using just this site. Okay, now I do use this as a teacher, and I've even used some of the stuff that is good for self-study as a teacher in kind of guided lessons. So I think there's some flexibility there, but that's what I would say. Okay, so I guess first question, for online learning, I would probably go here. Another place worth going, if I get back to our webpage here, is actually in the reading tools section, okay? So let's see here. Okay, if I go to the reading tools, this will take a second to load. There's some really good stuff here if I'm just a student, if I'm studying at home. Now, again, as a teacher, I could use these as well, but I would maybe start with TED Ed. So TED Ed, if you're not familiar, TED Talks, I think most of us know probably, are these professional leaders in various industries who will give talks. And the talks range greatly in subject and also in time, okay? So some of them are only 2-3 minutes long. Some of them are close to an hour long. As a teacher and also as a learner, I try to focus on shorter ones. And the reason for that is I like to be able to watch the video or to play the video multiple times. So here, what we can do, and I'll show you why this is a good site as well. But if I go to the duration, I like to set it to 0 to 6 minutes, okay? So you see that that's one of my filters now. Okay, now a lot of these have different languages in them in terms of the subtitles they get used. So presumably a lot of our students are Kazakh. And so if Kazakh subtitles are good, if Russian subtitles are good, this is something we could use. Now, I know what you're probably thinking is, why would we use those for teaching English, right? I understand that and I agree with you, but I want to show you how that would become useful. So here I've got a very short video about the coronavirus, okay? Something that is of great interest to our students, right? And I won't be showing this video right now, but what I want to show you instead is that if we look at oh, here, I'm on TED right now. If I look at TED Talks, let me get out of here. We're gonna go to TED Talks, the TED Ed rather. Where's that? Here we go. Wrong one. Oh no, just weird. Wrong link. Sorry. I'll get us there, guys. Here we go. TED Ed. Okay, so I would recommend still taking a short video like this and then watching it multiple times. And I actually got a really great activity from a former colleague of mine when I was an English language fellow in Kazakhstan. He took TED Talks and he would shorten them and teach note-taking to students. So I noticed one of our audience, our participants today, one of the teachers in our audience, Mark Alexander, was talking about using the Cornell note-taking method, which is a great thing to teach our students as well. But just getting them used to note-taking for comprehension's sake is very, very useful. And so what we would do, I would encourage students from home on the computer, or if they have a piece of paper in front of them or something, to set aside a place for vocabulary, a place for notes, and something, someplace where they could write a summary, okay? And so if a student is working from home on their own as a learner, me as a teacher, I'm going to encourage my students to do this, to create something like this. This is another way to do this, okay? So the teacher I was learning this from was working in an Uzbekistani context, but we would do this with Kazakh or Russian subtitles. You would show a video 3 times, and you would want to make it, you would want to start probably with the hardest material first. So I would show a video the first time with no subtitles at all, to see what the students are gaining, to see what the students understand, what questions do they have. And then I would allow that presentation to become more clear as we went. So probably I would start the second round of showing that video with English subtitles. And then I would go in the third round of showing that video, I would do it with probably Kazakh or Russian subtitles, okay? Whatever is the most comfortable or native language of my students. And this way, the students can actually kind of build sort of scaffolding. They can build what they know with each one of these views, okay? So that's what I would do generally with TED, I guess, as a learner, also as a teacher. But what I wanted to show you was TED Ed. I'm sorry, I need to change the link on our website. But TED Ed actually has lesson plans that have been created by teachers based around these TED Talks. And you can see, again, we have a big range in video length. I don't think I would probably use something that was 25 minutes long. People tune out. So let's see, what do I want to use? Maybe if we're talking about diversity and cultural, mutual respect of cultures and things like that, I might use this one about what it's like to be a Muslim in America. This could become a really interesting discussion for our students, right? And so here I've got a 4-minute video, 4 minutes and 15 seconds, and then it comes with questions, okay? Some of these questions are going to be multiple choice. Some of them are going to be short answer. Okay, so I haven't looked at this one beforehand, but they're all kind of built this way. Then you've got a section for more reading if you'd like. Okay, every one of these has a transcript that we can actually read along with as we watch the video, and then some open discussion where students could actually use this for discussion. Now, again, this is built in such a way that as a learner, somebody can do this from home, but as a teacher, we could actually use this to facilitate discussion with our students, okay? So let's see, what do I want to talk about? I'm going to focus on a couple of different things here. I've got my notes here. Content delivery, how do we engage students? I think one of the important things, we're on a Zoom call right now, and so we often forget, but one of the tools we need to be really comfortable with is the video communication technology itself. So you should, if you're going to use Zoom, you should know your Zoom program, okay? You definitely want to know how to share the screen, of course, but you also want to know about how to create polls, let's say, or how to use annotation, okay? How to create a situation where we could do breakout rooms, and I could put people in smaller rooms for group discussion among 3 or 4 people instead of a room of 20. When the students are in smaller groups, of course, as we know in physical classrooms, that creates a situation where they're more comfortable talking to each other. So again, if you weren't familiar with that function, That's breakout rooms, okay? Another tool that I like to use for content delivery, I guess, is Padlet, which is here. Padlet is not a free app. I really like to focus on free apps, but there is a free version where you can make 3 of these for free, okay? And this is what a Padlet looks like. It's basically just a wall where I can share resources, like what I've done for you here, okay? I can throw stuff up here, and students, if they want to, when I create this, I can make it possible for students to comment. Students can write something here. I could say, love this, or I could answer a question if there was a question up here, right? As a teacher, I can also add different files. I can link stuff. I can Google something. I could also take pictures and have the students actually write about those. And there's a lot more that I can do as well, okay? So this is one, it's very, very easy to make a Padlet. In fact, I would just recommend trying it yourself if you haven't. And so this is a good one. I would highly recommend using Padlet, okay? Another one that I think is good is called Google Classroom, okay? So I've got an example of that here. And again, this is more about the delivery of content. So I guess I'm talking less as a learner now and more as a teacher, right? But this is another one. I can create classrooms, okay? Here I've got an example of a class that I was working with on academic writing a couple of months ago, okay? If I go to classwork, I can actually put different topics here, okay? And I can add stuff if I want to, all right? I can put the students who are here, and I can add students to check their progress, and I can also put grades. So you've probably got a different system. You might be using Google Classroom already. Some people use one called Edmodo, but this is another one that I've liked to use in the past. It's nice that I can also set a calendar so that students don't have any question about when things are due. Okay, we're basically out of classes now for these guys, so I don't have anything coming up here. Okay, so in terms of class activities, how to move into class activities, beyond class activities, this kind of stuff. One of the other websites that I'd really like to share with you is American English at State. Okay, now there's a lot more beyond what I'm going to share. Probably will have time to share today, but I'll try my best to get through everything. So there's a bunch here that would be really, really great. But what I think is best for lesson planning is the English Teaching Forum. Okay. So again, there's so much here. You can get webinars for personal development, these MOOCs, the massive open online courses. All of this is free, by the way. There are textbooks, games, and more. But for lesson planning, the English Teaching Forum is the way to go. I can go to the current issue, but actually every issue back to 2002 is archived online. And what I'll see here is that I actually get lesson plans. So if I'm working on lesson planning, implementation, coming up with class activities, this would be a really great way to do that, right? So here I've got 3-part role plays. I've got an objective, right? Now I might have to change this for my audience. I might have to move it around and figure something out, but I've got a very clear step-by-step discussion of how to go about this class, and some suggestions for what to do if I wanted to change something or supplement it or scaffold it for my students, right? So really nice, clear ones. And what's most important for your understanding about this is actually searchable. So let's say I'm working on what you guys are information technology. So maybe I want something about I'm interested in reading about databases in America. Okay, nothing there. That's fine. I'm probably not searching the right stuff. Okay. So if I search information technology, I've got here a teacher's corner on technology. Okay, technology for content creation. And so all sorts of good stuff here. Science, technology, engineering, and math stuff, or STEM. with kind of different activities and games. And I can also do this, let's see if I search computer, what comes up. There's lots of good stuff. Searchable lesson plans, right? So here, I've got a lesson plan on making grammar fun, okay, using different websites as well. And so very good searchable database on the English Teaching Forum. This forum is also open for submissions. It's peer reviewed, which means that you've got professionals in the field of English language teaching who are actually reviewing all submissions, but this is available for teachers from around the world, okay? So information for submission is available here. This is, again, the American English at State website, okay? All right, so that's kind of what we've got for class activities. There's a lot more. I'm going to get into some of the stuff from the MOOC in a moment here, but I want to sort of move through these subjects as Jibek gave me, and then I'm going to kind of move from there. So if we talk about assessment and how do you grade your students, how do you check your students, there's a lot of ways to do that, right? So as an example, if I want to, I could create a poll, right? I could actually, now this is going to take me to the Zoom page, but on Zoom, I've got polls. WebEx actually has a similar feature. And so I could actually ask a question and have that come up for my students, right? So, right? Okay, so which of these tools do you find most useful and why, right? VOA, American English, and then I can just save that. I've got that now, so I can actually put that as a poll. I could launch that. You don't have to answer this, but this is one way in the middle of a session just to show you that I could actually assess informally my students' understanding. If I'm looking for something a little bit more formal, if I'm looking for something a little bit more complex or involved, I could go with Google Forms, which is a really great tool. Okay, so I'm gonna show us that now. Okay, Google Forms is nice because we're able to create different quizzes, activities, and so on, right? So I could do this as a survey, but I could also make this a test for students, right? Seems that my internet is not stable right now. Let me see, I'm gonna see if I can, okay, I guess it's working. If I start to have problems with that, I'll change my internet connection, don't worry. So here I can ask questions, okay? I can ask any question I want, really. I can add a picture if I want students to use that as well. And I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna look for one here. I have some different ones that are actually quizzes or questions. So this is good for doing as a survey, good for scheduling future meetings. Here, if I've got like a writing course, I might have different questions at the bottom where I would actually ask students to do some written prompt or something like that. And then what'll happen is once this is finished, I actually get all the responses and I can look at those individually so that I can see how did people answer these questions, right? So this is one way that I can assess the work of my students, okay? I can kind of go through, see what they've said. I can actually read through their material, and that's quite nice, actually. So this is one way to do assessment. Another way to do assessment, if I go back to our Padlet page, I've got a rubric maker here. So a rubric, probably many of us are familiar, is a way that we can kind of gauge the skill level of or the success of somebody's English language production, whether that's speaking or writing or some combination of the two, okay? So let's say my students are working on a research project, right? If I click this, now I wouldn't have to click this. I could start from the very beginning and just make this on my own. But here I've actually got kind of a ready to go research project, and then I can edit this material and information, okay? To show you how we would do that, so this is already ready to go, right? I could do this. I could say writing assignment, right? Or actually, let's say we're doing a debate. I do a lot of debates with my students. And I'm gonna make this rubric now, okay? I can choose different topics, right? So here, let's say I'm interested in the research that my students put into this, okay? And this is, I'm looking at the quality of the research, right? So I could change any of these. I can type more, I can delete it, but this kind of gives me a ready-made rubric that I could use, okay? So these are sort of quantitative, okay, rubrics. I can actually add the points, and if I put more, I'll get various rubrics that I can use to score, okay? So that's what I would use for assessment. I guess I could use more, but that's probably some of the first stuff I would use. The other tool that I want to show you, and I'm sure a lot of us are already familiar with this one too, but this is Google Docs, okay? I'm going to get through this, one or two other resources, and then I'll have about 10 minutes left with which I want to show you a lot of what's in this website, the various pages. I can kind of show you those tools as well. But I wanted to make sure that before I did any of that, that I really answered Jibek's questions as specifically as I could. Okay, so Google Docs, here's an example, let's say. So if I take this, I've taken an article from that Voa Learning English, which I said is good for learners, but it's also good as a teacher. I take the text, I've copied it, I've pasted it into a Google Doc, and then I create my own assignment for that. So here's the assignment. Maybe my students are working on transitions. Like I said, I do a lot with writing, and maybe that's something that is important to me, that they understand how to use transitions. So the objective is, in the exercise below, read the article and highlight any transition words or phrases that show transition or addition, right? And so the students would have to look through this. They're able to find words like another and highlight them. So we've got a highlighter here, there we go. Okay, and I can highlight. Every student could use a different color if you wanted to. We can also write comments, right? So I could say something, what's this mean? Now, something like that. And so Google Docs as a program, this is something that I can easily share with others. All I have to do is take this link that I'll be given, right? And then I could actually just share this even in our group chat right now, and you would be able to get on. In fact, I'll do that. You don't have to get on, but you can just see how easy this will be to do, right? Okay. So this is another way we could do this, right? Using Google Docs, we could actually collaboratively or collectively kind of work together on a piece of writing, okay? And so that's one way that I can control process. I'm actually able to look at who is contributing what to various group activities or group projects. Another way that we can use Google Docs, if I go back here, let me see, do I have, oh, here, I know where it is. Okay. I've got a lot of Google Docs here. Oh, here, I'm not gonna be able to find it that way. I'll go this way. I wanted to show you one other thing that I like to do with this. So you can use this for writing. You can use this when you're looking at each other's essays for peer editing or something like that. I also like to use this for analyzing the various parts of a text. So here is an activity that I have done with cover letters, okay? The letter that a person writes to apply for university or for a job in a lot of cases. And so I've used a website called Purdue OWL, which is the online writing lab, to help me identify some of the key features of a good cover letter. And it's these. I've color coded them. And then I would give students a sample letter that I could write myself, maybe one that I found online, as long as I'm citing sources correctly. And then I could actually have them identify by color the various features of that letter that they like so much. right? And so by doing this, we're actually able to pick apart on kind of a microscopic level the important features of this kind of writing, right? And that's going to help my students actually write better as well. Okay, so that's Google Docs. Process control also, I would just say that we have a real clear need for objectives. We need to be very clear and measurable in our objectives. When I say measurable, I mean that we need to know how many words the students are supposed to accomplish or to write, or we need to know how many features of an app they're going to be considering today, this kind of thing very specifically. And then we look at how the tools available can meet our objectives, okay? Another thing, a lot of times teachers at home, I think, feel limited in their ability to interact with students because we're not in a classroom physically. But I think if we ask ourselves, how can the objects in your home or office become visual aids to encourage interaction with your students? Okay, so another question that I think is really important there. Okay, so that takes me back to our page here. Okay, and again, I'm not going to go through all of this right now, but if we go through the different sections, reading and writing technology, it's actually a lot of stuff I've already kind of talked about. There are some other resources on here that I would encourage you to look at on your own. I want to give Jubek a chance. I know she's going to answer me some other questions, and certainly I want you to have a chance to ask me some questions as well. But I would say going through this material, I've got PowerPoints that kind of explain how each of these is used as well, would be a really great way to do this. Okay, so I guess with that, let me see. I want to make sure I hit all my notes that I wanted to. Yeah, I think that covers about what I wanted to say, at least initially. And I would encourage, like I said, I would encourage everyone to go through this website later and maybe get some more details on specific tools. Okay. But Jubek, I think that's, I'll pass it back to you for a second.
Okay. I think you have already passed my question 5 and question 6. So how to achieve the quality of teaching or learning via online using these digital tools? Is it possible or not, or is it a responsibility of a person and it's not uncontrollable?
So, Jubek, one of the reasons I was so happy to do this with you today is I really appreciate the quality of these questions, and I think they're challenging questions. And so this one, can we control achieving quality of teaching? I think to an extent we can. You know, when we're in a physical classroom, can we ensure quality as well? Sometimes. I give you an example. Sometimes the best plans don't work, right? I had a really good lesson plan. My first time I was teaching in front of my education advisor when I was in graduate school. I was in California, and it wasn't just the first time I was teaching in a graduate school setting. It was also the first earthquake I ever experienced. I was 5 minutes into my lesson and an earthquake happened. We all had to get under the desks. It kind of threw the whole thing off. I had to change everything. So I guess what I would say, you know, to answer this question, we can do better with careful planning. It's also really important to practice with tools and to become familiar with them ourselves. My #1 student is my 5-year-old son. I practice everything on him first, at least just to get familiar with the tool, right? And that way we can kind of ensure that our lessons are well structured. It's really important in the same way as it's important to understand your tools. It's important in a physical classroom to understand your space. Where are the desks? Can everybody see the board? Is the sunlight hitting somebody in such a way that they can't see us? These are some of the same considerations. That level of detail, it's the same kind of thing that we need to do with online teaching. We need to be looking at our tools and seeing how they work. But to kind of answer that question, I would say, yes, it's possible with some limits, yeah. The last thing I would say about that is it's really important to listen to your students. So good teachers are good listeners, and they're better students, okay? I don't mean better than your students. I mean, good teachers are better students than they are teachers. And so we need to be listening to people so that we can actually give feedback. I saw a story about a teacher in America who spoke for an hour and 10 minutes to his students without noticing that all the comments on his Zoom call were telling him that his call was muted. He wasn't listening at all. And so we need to be aware. We need to read the room and be aware of what's going on. But yeah, that kind of answers the question, I think. So.
Okay, and my last question, I think 3 minutes left for me, and the rest of the time will be for, I will give my colleagues to talk with you. So my last question is, are there any pitfalls in applying these digital tools? And what should we be aware of in applying these digital tools as English language instructors? You know, sometimes you choose one tools, you say, oh, this is a very good one, popular one, and when you come to the class and something doesn't work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you know, I think we've all been learning this the hard way as teachers during this COVID-19 lockdown. There definitely are pitfalls. And so here's some of the ones that I have identified. Maybe you've identified something different, and I would be happy to hear from you, anybody out there. But the one that comes up most obviously is internet accessibility. Some students have better access to Wi-Fi than others. Some students have no access to Wi-Fi at all. Some students have access to Wi-Fi, but especially for adults in university programs, they might have baby brothers or baby sisters that they're busy with, or that are also using internet for their schooling. And so it becomes difficult. We need to make sure that we have some option for people that don't have that accessibility, whether that's communication via WhatsApp, teaching via WhatsApp, or whatever. It's really important that we have equal access. I think without equal access, we're not really ensuring the kind of safe and engaging classroom that we, I consider we sort of take on this promise when we become teachers. And so I think this is really, really important. With that and the equal access, there are some really great programs out there that actually have paywalls. If you're not familiar with a paywall, I mean that this is something that there's maybe a little bit that's free, but then there's kind of an expensive part as well. I don't like using those with students. I guess you could say, oh, you know, use this if you want to, but don't use it if you don't want. That again creates kind of an unfair atmosphere, doesn't it? Maybe I have a student who has the money and is able to pay for use of this app, and another student doesn't, right? So if you are going to use programs with PayPals, how can those be afforded? Is there some way to get a scholarship for them or a grant? And so then the last thing I would say is use of these tools. They're not all equal in terms of their familiarity or ease of use. So some of our students, I know we're working with an IT audience here, so most of our students are probably very familiar with IT and the kind of digital tools that we're seeing right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all those tools are going to be comfortable for everybody. I'm pretty comfortable with digital tools myself, and a very popular platform, Microsoft Teams, doesn't work for me. And the reason it doesn't work for me is that the team I work with actually all have different email addresses. We actually all work under different supervisors, and so we're not able to connect. That's the kind of stuff that as a teacher, I need to be aware of with that tool or with anything else, accessibility. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ben. So thank you for your squeezing all the information in 15 minutes, and I think we could do that. And my colleagues, you're welcome with your questions. So if you have any questions, you unmute your microphone and go ahead with your questions.
Yes, I have a couple of questions, and thank you, Ben. That was really good. One that I kind of using you said they have students in small groups so they could discuss things together. I don't know that there's a capability of doing that in Microsoft Teams of individuals. It seems like I can only talk to the whole classroom at once. So I don't think it has that capability. If somebody knows that it does, please tell me.
Mm.
I don't think it does.
It may
And
not.
we're limited because that's what we have to use, because
Oh, you're on
that's the
Teams.
platform we use.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I've been getting them in individual chats so I can have some kind of individual communication with them and not showing my screen at the time.
Right.
And that seems to work, and putting them in groups that way, but it's more chatting, texting than it is as voice, because my voice will be heard for everybody. So that would be nice if we could not do that.
Yeah. So I'll just respond quickly to that. So I'm not, I can't say that I use Teams very much myself. I actually found it pretty complicated. That being said, I do follow the Microsoft Teams social media team, their outlets on Facebook and Instagram to look at updates. I know that they're updating constantly. So breakout rooms may be in the works. I think failing that, having something like Google Docs, kind of a shared note-taking space where students could actually kind of comment to each other. That's maybe one option. The one-on-one that you're talking about is a pretty good option as well. You know, and then maybe having like sub WhatsApp groups for different speakers, that may be something as well. But I'm not sure, you know, given your context, I'm not sure. So.
No, you're breaking up quite a bit now.
Okay, I'm gonna switch my internet. Give me a second here. I'm gonna change my internet. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Okay. This should be much better. I've just changed my internet over to my phone data. So sorry about that. Yeah.
That's better. Yeah, thanks for trying to work around that. I have another question. Our students are really quite advanced in their English. They have no problem communicating. Their vocabulary is pretty good and those kinds of things. But the real problem, so we need more advanced materials. The ones you showed us were a lot of really good for beginners and intermediate, but our students are quite advanced. But what they don't have is any kind of academic background. They have no idea how to cite things or the reason for it. And that's what they're really struggling with. What is it, going from the different register of casual conversation to a more advanced level of academic conversation. They don't really know how to do that.
Mark, thank you very much. If I can call you Mark, thank you very much for thank you very much for
Alexander one is a little bit too formal.
Okay, I'm going to share a link here. This is actually on the website. I didn't share it today because I was so limited in time, but this is the Purdue OWL, the online writing lab, and this saved my life as a graduate student. This is what I tend to use with my I've also worked post-secondary, and so this is the stuff I use with those students when we're working on research projects and what have you. So if I go to the writing lab, I've actually got here. Let me see if I can. Sorry, I was ready for this question, but I wasn't ready. I have to find the section on here. Oh, that's not it, definitely. Purdue OWL. Okay, there's a section on here for citation. Here we go, research and citation. And so if I go here, I've actually got citation styles complete with sample essays and formatting for various styles. Now, I'm not sure what someone in IT would use. I guess I would guess APA style. I'm not totally sure. I can tell you in English.
We're using APA. I have actually used Purdue before. I was thinking more in terms of self-study kinds of things that the students could do to improve their English and academic level.
Okay. Yeah. Really good question. I guess I would go, in terms of self-selection, I would go to some of the publications that I like to use. And so, you know, if I'm looking at, let's say, politics, or really any field, one of my favorite, and this isn't even really, you know, teaching material necessarily, but like, I would go to the publications that I like to read. So The Economist, let's say. Just as an example. And so then here I've got a much closer to academic level of language that would be going on, but still working in kind of a pop culture lens where I've got various articles from around the world, including stuff in the sciences and technology. See if I can find that section here. I'm not totally sure. I haven't been to this website in a while. There is a paywall here, but not for everything. So if I go to science technology, I should be able to get an article for free. Let's see. And there was just this, with everything else happening this week, it was easy to miss the part that SpaceX actually had a successful launch in space. Here I've got an article, much more challenging article, right? And so if I sign in, I get 3 free articles. So just one example of many I could use for academic reading. Let me see, I'm seeing something in the chat. Make sure I'm not missing something here. Okay, someone was saying they use IEEE. That's fine. All right, so how do I, okay, there we go, good. So I would maybe use The Economist. I might use Google Scholar, which I'm sure we're also kind of familiar with, but this is a good searchable database of different scholarly materials, okay? And so I could actually find, not, again, a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of academic material does have a paywall, but a lot of universities, including Astana IT, I would imagine, have some kind of partnership with some organization that actually kind of links us to this material. So if I search coding, let's say, okay, and I really, unfortunately, I'm not anywhere even close to an academic when it comes to IT. But here I've got a bunch of different articles. I could actually search for more recent. So if I want something brand new, okay, this would be since 2020. I could search 2019. I could go from 2016, and I've got a nice range of academic literature here. This is more stuff that comes from academic journals. So we're working at like a higher level here. But I would be able to find this. And then again, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get the whole, I'll probably just get the abstract. This looks like it's the full article. And so sometimes you will get the full article. If you don't, you'll at least have the information available to you. If I go back, I can actually see, clicking here, I can see how to search for this. And then I might be able to go into my university library and actually find this material off of that. So as a researcher, I think this is a good tool. As a research writer, I'm probably off track here a little bit. Something like Zotero is a really nice program. This is a way that I can actually gather different cited sources and kind of compile them. Let's see if I can just find an image. It's gonna be easier than showing it to you. Here, I can actually take, see if I can make this bigger. There we go. I can take different articles and categorize them by whether they're books, publications, the year of publication. I can write a little abstract here. And this is a very good way of compiling sources that I might be using for written academic work as well. Mark, I'm not entirely sure that answers your questions, but I would say those are some places to go for.
Yeah, it does. That's really good.
I think you have some other colleagues. There are some other colleagues who want to address their questions. Yes, Siri Fosun.
Hello, Ben. Thank you a lot for taking your time and showing us all these resources. So my question isn't really, let's say, about specific apps, but rather about the number of apps that you recommend using during lessons, because I imagine that students might be overloaded with so much, especially like when they have to deal with multiple accounts and when they're like already experiencing, let's say, burnout.
Yeah. It's a really good point, and that's something we absolutely need to be considering as teachers. I look at it this way. I think what's really important is that we're not introducing too much new material in a lesson. New material is, of course, important, but we don't want to have 4 or 5 new apps that we're not using before, of course. I like to introduce in my first introductory session, one of my real go-tos is this Padlet stuff. So I try to introduce Padlet, I try to introduce whatever platform we're going to be using. And then after that, we go into 3 or 4 tools that we might discuss. Or to be honest with you, it depends how often I'm meeting the students and what their expectations are, but I might just focus on 1 or 2 tools. And so I find, especially with my students, that is the better way to do it. I try to find intersections between tools that I think could be interesting, like using Voice of America with Google Docs, let's say, or some of the readability tools where I can actually check the language and identify language with that. I might combine that with something, but I try not to use too many at once. That's a good point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, do you have other questions? If yes, please, you're welcome.
Yeah,
It's
there's a good one here from Medina. Medina says, how do we encourage low-level students to speak in online classes? What activities could be done? That's a really good question. So I'm gonna take that back to something that I did want to show you. And so I'm gonna share my screen in a second here. I'm gonna pull up the document I want first. I like to use pictures kind of as a warm-up activity with my students because it does encourage discussion. And so if I go to the day in photos again, I'm going to go back a while because I don't want just photos of protest, or there's nothing wrong with those photos, but I don't want only those in COVID. I try to find something that's kind of separate from that. Let me see. I'll go back here. Looks like I'm still in COVID territory here. That's fine. Oh, here, this is good. This is a very interesting photo, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm looking at here. Okay, so I would take a photo like this, and it's quite interesting. I would probably hide the caption, but I might ask different questions. Now, this doesn't necessarily get to the academic nature of what Mark was referring to, but for students who maybe don't talk so much and I'm trying to get discussion, I might use a different photo. I would use something relevant to my subject material, but I would ask different leveled questions. And I would try to do this in a way that the students are actually talking just one or two to each other. So again, I'm not super familiar with Microsoft Teams, but it sounds like there's a way to do private chatting. I might have the students private chat with each other, or even just send messages to each other on WhatsApp or whatever. But I would ask different difficulty level questions. So the first question I might ask is, what is the man wearing? And then we have to describe it, right? Well, he's wearing a helmet with different bottles. Okay, why is he wearing that? He's wearing it to keep distance. Okay, another question, would you wear this? Why or why not? And then we're getting into that. And then from there, like, imagine that you had to create some kind of masks to keep people from your distance using recycled materials. What would you create and how, right? So now we're getting into like more creative territory, a little bit more whatever. But I think when we want to get people speaking who are not used to speaking or are not comfortable with speaking in an online environment, the most important thing to do, I think, is to keep it varied. You want to change things up a little bit. Not so varied, back to what I want to say it was, get the name right here. Keeping in mind what Cedric Wilson said, we don't want to have so much that we're losing the students, but we want to have a variety of activities, and we want those activities to be fun. I think especially when it's this burnout, as you're talking about. Yeah, students are used to having summer vacation right now, and for a lot of them, it's scary to even go outside, right? So it's a very different environment than they would have been used to. I think it's really important to keep it fun. So creativity is a fun thing. If I was in IT, I might have different articles about a problem or challenge in our community, whether that's too much trash on the ground or it's too hot in places or whatever. Have the students kind of talk with each other, identify some of those problems, and then do like an app creation contest. If the students can actually create apps, that's amazing. I've never had those kind of students, but I've never worked in a school like yours, so I don't even know. But if not, then maybe I would just have them kind of hypothetically create apps, like designing the app and talking about it and discussing. And so this is kind of a fun thing. If you have that element of like friendly competition, I think that's a fun thing too. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's sort of what I would say. That's how I try to encourage people to speak. I focus on small group, I focus on fun activities, and I think pictures help as well, or video.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, colleagues, for your questions, for your participation and joining us. I hope you will you enjoyed the information that Ben delivered to you. And Ben, what about the Padlet link? Will you send me to my email and so that I will be able to share with my colleagues, and whenever they have time, they can look at and study all this, explore all the digital tools.
Absolutely, I can do that. I will gladly send it to your email. I've also I didn't even ask you, Zibek, but I've just decided to record this session. So I'll send you the recording of the session as well, so that you've got that if you want it.
Thank you, great.
Of course, and there's the link as well if you're looking for it. So, okay.
Okay. Thank you, great. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Rock me up.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. It was really good.
Thank you, Mark. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Zibek, thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for coming.
Goodbye.
Good time.
Bye.